Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. Back to the negotiation table after 8 months. The North's recent missile launch wasn't enough to shake Washington's resolve to go full steam ahead into working-level nuclear talks in Sweden. They sit down on Saturday. Typhoon Mitag has departed the Korean peninsula, but not before claiming 10 lives and leaving 4 people missing in the south of the country. Hundreds of homes and businesses also suffer severe flood damage. Plus, the gloves are most definitely off now. US President Donald Trump says China should start an investigation into the Bidens. He says what happened in China with the former vice president and his son Hunter is just as bad as what happened with Ukraine. Our top story this morning, North Korea's chief nuclear envoy negotiator has voiced high expectations and optimism for the regime's upcoming working-level nuclear talks with the US that will take place in the Swedish capital of Stockholm. This comes as US President Donald Trump brushed off North Korea's latest test fire of a claimed, submarine-launched ballistic missile, saying the talks with Pyongyang will continue as planned. Our Jaein starts us off.
North Korea's top nuclear negotiator Kim Myung-gil and his delegation arrived in Stockholm on Thursday, ahead of this weekend's working-level denuclearization negotiations with the U.S. They arrived at Stockholm's Arlanda airport at around 5:40 p.m. local time on a flight from Beijing. Before his arrival in Sweden, the North Korean envoy said he was optimistic the talks will go well.
North Korea and the U.S. will hold working-level talks. With the new signal from the U.S., we leave with great anticipation and optimism.
The two sides are set to have a preliminary contact on Friday before holding the working-level talks on Saturday. The U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, will lead Washington's delegation. The two sides are expected to focus on trying to find common ground between U.S. demands for the regime's complete and verified denuclearization and the North's demand for sanctions relief and security guarantees. With North Korea's firing of a submarine-launched ballistic missile in the East Sea this week, there were concerns the test could derail the upcoming working-level talks. However, President Trump on Thursday downplayed the firing, saying the North wants to talk and the U.S. will be talking to them. All eyes are on the first round of formal negotiations between the two sides since the second North Korea-U.S. summit ended early in Hanoi in February. Focus is also on whether President Trump's previously touted new method will give the negotiations some momentum and possibly lay the groundwork for a third summit. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff says North Korea's latest missile launch appears to have come from a sea-based platform, not a submarine as the regime has claimed. North Korea says it successfully tested a new submarine-launched ballistic missile off its east coast on Wednesday. However, the spokesperson for the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff says there's no indication it was launched from a submarine, adding it was a short to medium-range ballistic missile. Experts also say the missile could have flown a greater distance if it had been fired at a normal angle and not in vertical mode. Britain, France and Germany have requested a closed-door meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss North Korea's recent test firing of that ballistic missile. Thursday's request was made after the North announced the successful launch of what it called a new type of SLBM. The three sides asked for the meeting to take place on Friday local time. UN Security Council resolutions ban the North from testing ballistic missile technology. Now, let's get an expert's take on this weekend's meeting in Sweden between working-level officials of North Korea and the United States on the regime's denuclearization. I'm glad to say we are joined on Skype by Dr. Mark P. Barry, an independent Asian affairs analyst who has followed US-North Korea relations for nearly 30 years now. So, Mark, I'd like to start by asking, these two sides, the US and North Korea, haven't sat down since the Hanoi summit collapsed with no deal around 8 months ago now. Given that this is their first face-to-face since February, what are your expectations for these discussions in Sweden?
Well, we expect them, Mark, to meet for about a day and a half. Obviously, nothing's going to be solved in a day or a day and a half, but if they meet weekly or every 10 days and they continue that process, which was kind of the pattern of the talks that began in 1993 in Geneva, under the Clinton administration, where there were regular meetings that went all the way on through the agreed framework of October 94, then you can see some fruitful product. But I think it would be absolutely incorrect to have expectations that everything will be solved in 1 or 2 meetings. But the fact that it's the foreign ministry in North Korea that's leading the negotiations this time, and the fact that the U.S. side has a new national security advisor, then I think that there's a much hopeful sign for progress.
Now, as you touched upon briefly there, things really have changed quite a lot since Hanoi. President Trump has floated this new method of moving forward. Like you say, John Bolton is out of the White House. Kim Young-chul is no longer the head of the North's delegation. And we are edging ever closer to the 2020 US presidential election. So Trump really wants a big foreign policy win that he can sell to voters. Do these factors mean the US will provide the flexibility North Korea has been demanding from Washington for so long now?
Well, it's going to be a rough negotiation. If the media reports are even largely correct, that the U.S. is prepared to allow 3 years of sanctions lifted on the exports of North Korean textiles and coal in exchange for the freezing and closure of Yangbyan nuclear facility and possibly something else, that may be seen by the North as a lopsided bargain. That's why it's going to be a hard-nosed negotiation. And if I were President Trump, I'd be hoping for some meeting this year, but it may not be possible because the North will dig in its heels and make the U.S. pay a greater price than perhaps it's expecting. But nonetheless, this is the way to make progress, but it has to be a lot of really careful and considerate bargaining without either side giving up.
Well, yes, talks are better than no talks at all. Now, many were really surprised when North Korea launched a ballistic missile just days ahead of this meeting in Sweden. As we know with North Korea, the timing of these launches are never a coincidence. Why do you think the regime pulled this potentially risky move so close to these talks?
There are multiple reasons, but the most important reason is not only to gain leverage, but it's a sign that North Korea cannot be mistreated. So it's always about the prestige of the state and the fact that they want to be seen and dealt with by the United States almost as equals, even though there's such a huge disparity between both countries. So the firing of such a missile with its potential lethality, certainly upon the entire Japanese nation, is a very, very strong signal for Northeast Asia. And it's their way of saying to the United States, you have to take us seriously, you cannot mistreat us, and you cannot ignore us. So to me, that's a not inconsistent message with how North Korea has been bargaining with the U.S. since the early 1990s. It's not a bad sign, but I think it is a byproduct of the unfortunate events since Hanoi, including a lot of misreading of each other's intentions in the month of August.
Now, before we let you go, do you expect Kim Jong-un and President Trump to hold a third summit soon? And if so, when do you think it'll happen and where? And also, do you think there's any chance at all of Kim heading to the United States or Trump going the other way?
I think Kim wants to have it in Pyongyang, and of course he'd be happy to have it by the end of the year. We don't know if there's a next year. Kim has been very clear in his own words that really something has to be settled by the end of the year. So I do think that's North Korea's deadline. Otherwise, they may pull some interesting stunts that will be very upsetting to the United States and its allies. On the other hand, President Trump, maybe the most he can do is invite Kim to Honolulu. But Trump would prefer a third country. I don't think Kim wants to go to any country where he could be sent home unexpectedly. Certainly not Mongolia. And if he were to go to anywhere in Europe, whether it's Stockholm or Geneva, the reality is that he could still be sent packing, but have to take an Air China flight back home, which would be even more embarrassing. If I were Kim, I would want it in Pyongyang, and President Trump may find that he has to relent to that, but it all depends on what kind of deal he can sign, and that's always the million-dollar question. What kind of a deal does President Trump have and that he can politically accept in order to use that to buttress his campaign into 2020?
Well, seeing President Trump in Pyongyang would be quite something, but I suppose with the way things have been developing over the past year or 18 months, you can never second-guess anything these days.
You never know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much for your perspective. We always appreciate your insights.
You're quite welcome.
Yeah, and we'll see how this weekend unfolds, and hopefully we'll invite you back for a breakdown of how these talks went. That was Dr. Mark P. Barry. Thank you ever so much for joining us.
Sure.
Now, in other news, the number of confirmed cases of African swine fever here in South Korea has edged up to 13 following the confirmation of a new case at a pig farm in Gimpo, west of Seoul. Since the first case was confirmed less than 3 weeks ago, the authorities are trying to stop the animal disease spreading. The Agriculture Ministry says all pigs within a 3-kilometer radius of the affected farms in Gimpo and Paju will be culled. For pigs outside that radius, the government will buy them off the farmers. The pigs will then be sent to slaughterhouses where they will be tested before the meat is sold to the market. In addition, the government says it has found traces of the African swine fever in a dead wild boar found in the DMZ near Yeoncheon. It marks the first time the virus has been detected in a wild boar, but officials say it's unlikely the animal came from north of the border. Typhoon Mitag has come and gone, but not after leaving a trail of havoc across the southern part of South Korea. 10 people were killed as the region was lashed by heavy rain and powerful winds. The death toll could also go up as it's feared some people are trapped inside collapsed buildings. Won Jung-hwan with the details.
It's been dubbed a record-breaking water bomb. Authorities say Typhoon Mitag killed 10 people and left 4 missing. Among the dead, the body of a 65-year-old female owner of a small restaurant was found at around 4 p.m. on Thursday, about 7 hours after she was buried under a landslide in the southeastern port city of Busan. A 44-year-old man and his parents were also killed in a landslide. The season's 18th typhoon slammed the country's southern and eastern regions with torrential rain and strong winds, causing victims to be swept away by flash floods and buried under the landslide. While authorities are hoping the 4 missing people will be found alive, they are not excluding the possibility that some of them might be trapped inside collapsed buildings. The typhoon caused widespread property damage, and authorities are gearing up to rebuild the hardest-hit areas. Some 2,000 private and public facilities were flooded during the typhoon. 80% will be restored on a fast-track emergency basis. More than 48,000 homes suffered power outages, but electricity to 95% of them has been restored. The Land Ministry says it will complete safety checks and maintenance work on damaged roads by end of the month. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스.
President Moon Jae-in will have a working lunch with the leaders of 4 major economic organizations today. In the first such meeting for 3 months, the president is likely to discuss ways to help revitalize the economy, which has seen no consumer price growth for 2 straight months, adding to worries over deflation. The participants may also discuss how businesses are coping with Japan's trade restrictions against South Korea. Attending the lunch are the heads of the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Korea Enterprises Federation, Korea Federation of SMEs, and the Korea International Trade Association. Facing a Democrat-led impeachment inquiry after urging Ukraine to investigate his political rival Joe Biden, U.S. President Donald Trump is now asking China to open a probe into the former vice president over various allegations of corruption. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Thursday, he openly called for Beijing to launch an investigation into Biden and his son Hunter for what he claims is their corrupt actions that saw them pocket huge amounts of money. However, he added he hasn't directly asked Chinese leader Xi Jinping to investigate yet.
I haven't, but it's certainly something we can start thinking about, because I'm sure that President Xi does not like being under that kind of scrutiny, where billions of dollars is taken out of his country by a guy that just got kicked out of the Navy.
Joe Biden's son, Hunter, was on the board of a Ukrainian gas company and created a private equity fund in China while his father was vice president. Trump's latest appeal to Beijing came as a surprise, given that the two countries are still locked in a prolonged trade war. South Korea's 100th National Sports Festival kicks off in the coming hours. First held in 1920, the festival has grown into the country's biggest nationwide annual sports competition. So we thought we'd take a sneak peek at this year's festival, which is back here in Seoul, where it all began a century ago. Kan Hyung-woo went to check it out and filed this report.
Last month, the torch for the 100th National Sports Festival was lit on South Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo. The torch has been traveling around the nation since then, with a record 1,100 torchbearers taking part, carrying the torch a combined distance of 2,019 kilometers.
The National Sports Festival is our biggest and has the most historic meaning. I hope it can continue to grow for the next 100 years, and I hope this year's event can possibly contribute to Seoul's joint bid with Pyongyang for the 2032 Summer Olympics.
From this Friday through next Thursday, some 30,000 athletes will be competing in a total of 47 different sports at 72 venues in Seoul and other parts of the nation. And for the first time in the history of the National Sports Festival, there is a global sports festival prepared for foreigners living in Seoul. Some 400 foreign residents from 39 countries are set to compete in 7 different sports on the sidelines of the main event. After the week-long sports festival, the 39th National Para Games will also be held from October 15th to October 19th. As the venue for the first National Sports Festival back in 1920, Seoul looks to serve as the starting point for the next century of South Korean sport by hosting the 100th National Sports Festival this year. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information useful for your everyday life, whether you're in Korea or somewhere else around the world. Now, it's fair to say that we all crave something sweet from time to time, and the sugar rush seems to have hit new heights with the craze over brown sugar or black sugar beverages here in South Korea. Now, as delicious as they may be, I'm yet to try myself, it is raising concerns that people in South Korea are consuming too much sugar. We have our Oh Soo-young in the studio to take a look at this trend and to uncover some of the rather unsweetened truths about these particular drinks that are taking South Korea by storm. Thanks for joining us this morning, Soo-young. So we've seen a surge in these brown sugar and black sugar themed menus in coffee shops. Now they've spread out, they're available in most cafes, and we're even starting to see them pop up in convenience stores as well.
That's right. Black sugar, or brown sugar as some call it, has definitely been the flavour of the season. And the original brown sugar tea is said to have originated from a Taiwanese bubble tea franchise, which opened its doors in Seoul earlier this year. And since then, the rest has been history. Forget mocha frappuccinos or even cold brew coffee. From espresso-based drinks to bubble tea and ice cream, brown or black sugar is, well, the new black. This has spilled over to confectionery as well, as you said. You can see black sugar flavoured popcorn, cake, flavoured milk, and all sorts of snacks in convenience stores now.
Yeah, there's one of those Taiwanese black or brown sugar tea shops in my neighbourhood. There's always a huge line of people outside.
Yeah, lots of people queuing up.
I think that's the most popular one here. But it just makes you wonder, really, since the name suggests that it has a lot of sugar in them, how much sugar are we talking about in each of these drinks?
Well, it really depends on which cafe you go to or who's making it, really.
Yeah.
So what I did was compile a list of some black or brown sugar tea beverages that are available in the most popular cafes. And as you can see here, they vary from 36 grams to nearly 60 grams of sugar in a cup of beverage, and that would be around 400 to 480 millilitres, and these are usually iced, of course. So in terms of teaspoons, that would be about 17 to 15 teaspoons of sugar.
Well, that's quite incredible, really. 6 to 12 teaspoons of sugar in one of these drinks. But for the average adult, based on a daily intake of 2,000 calories, what would that amount to in terms of sugar then?
Well, for the average adult, that would be about 50 grams. That amounts to about 200 calories or 12 teaspoons of sugar. But the WHO actually says we should aim for 5% of daily calorie intake. So that would be about 6 teaspoons a day.
Well, so doesn't that mean that most of these sweetened beverages, even just one a day, would put us over that limit?
Yes, you're right. To give you an example, why don't you pick a drink if you had the choice between maybe orange juice or a mocha frappuccino or maybe a can of Coke?
Okay, a can of Coke.
Okay, for a can of Coke, you would have 9 teaspoons of sugar.
Right. So there's more sugar in one of these brown sugar beverages than there is in a can of Coke?
Yes, definitely, because while they obviously come in larger cups, and also, you know, some franchises put in up to 20 teaspoons of sugar.
Wow.
I won't say which one, but they do. So, yeah, you should definitely look out for it.
Yeah.
And as you can see, most of our favourite beverages, like soda, a glass of orange juice in the morning even, and also vitamin water, which sounds incredibly healthy, but it's not. They all put us over the WHO's recommendations.
Even vitamin water?
Yes, even vitamin water, or vitamins, as the Americans say it.
Right.
So that's why this recent sugar rush has a lot of health experts worried, because obviously sugar isn't, you know, if you take it excessively, then it's not very healthy for you. And according to health authorities, those who consume more than the recommended intake have around 40% higher chance of developing conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, and fat around your middle.
When we chew and digest carbohydrates, they are broken down and absorbed slowly as glucose, our body's main source of energy. But sugar and brown sugar, which is very trendy right now, is absorbed quickly without the digestive process, as they're made up of monosaccharides and disaccharides. So they can raise blood sugar levels very quickly and spark various addiction, symptoms, or ill effects. Sugar is also low in nutrients, but high in calories.
Yeah, it really is terrible for your health. There's no way around it, unfortunately. It's a shame it just tastes so good to all of us. But is there any other alternative out there, like syrups or artificial sweeteners? Are they any better for our health if you want to switch to them instead of sugar?
Well, these days, a lot of people mistakenly think that maple syrup or honey could be good substitutes. But obviously, if you take them in excessive doses, then obviously that's also bad for you because they contain sugar as well.
Yeah.
And as for artificial sweeteners like xylitol, for instance, health experts say that they do give you maybe the same level of sweetness as sugar for a very small amount. But if you take it excessively, then it can have some harmful effects.
Syrup and sugar are similar in that they both raise blood sugar levels quickly. So in that respect, it doesn't make a big difference which you consume. As for sugar substitutes like xylitol, it is 300 times sweeter as sugar for a much smaller amount, which means lower calories. It's absorbed slowly too. However, it can cause diarrhea or abdominal bloating. This should also be taken in moderation.
Well, they do say sugar is addictive, and as much as it is rather addictive, we really need to stop ourselves from overindulging. I think that's the only solution, really.
Yeah, save your sweet treats for special occasions. I think that's the best advice for everyone.
Yes.
Seoul, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Good morning. We had sunny skies and a gentle breeze to kick off the day, and highs will continue to be summer-like in most regions, hovering around 27 to 28 degrees in most parts of the country under mostly sunny skies. So it's a great day to spend some time outdoors and soak up some sunshine. In fact, regular sun exposure is the most natural way to get enough vitamin D, especially between 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. It does help to maintain bone health and healthy blood levels. However, it's almost time to put all of your summer clothes away and get your autumn wardrobe ready. It's going to start to feel more like autumn from this weekend, more like temperatures we generally see around this time of year. Daily highs will only reach into the low 20s. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. Stay tuned to Arirang TV, and a reminder, our next newscast is at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.